Hi, I'm Steve Morgan with American Family Insurance.
I'm Bart Jackson with American Family Insurance.
And I'm going to be talking to you today about flood insurance.
And I'll be talking about sewer backup.
So we're hoping these nuggets of information are going to help you avoid claims in the future.
And thank you for joining us for our second Safety Nugget. And we're going to start off with Steve talking about flood insurance.
Okay, and now for my portion of today's information is the flood insurance. And flood insurance is a good topic this time of year, and we'll get into the whys later on.
Well, Steve, how do you get flood insurance?
Well, there's only one place to get flood insurance, and that's with the National Flood Insurance Program in the U.S. of America. And in order for you to obtain flood insurance, your community has to be a participating community. And in Rice County, we are since 1978, when our first flood map was created. Speaking of which, getting flood insurance, here's an example of a flood map that our county has, and this is a particular area in town. Does anyone notice where this is? Here's our Cannon River, here's the Woolen Mill Dam, here's the Straight River. So we have Zone A, which is the real high flood zone, and then we have other zones outside of that, which would maybe be a non-flood zone.
Well, Steve, what's a flood zone?
Well, okay, that's a good question, because just like any government program, they would have that exactly nailed down. And here we have it. Special Flood Hazard Area. Now, in the government, they acronym everything, so that's a SPFHA. That's a 1% chance of flooding in any given year, and at least 26% chance of flooding over a 30-year life of a mortgage. So that's some pretty serious numbers. So this is why flood insurance is so important for some of the building structures that we have. You can get flood insurance even if you're not in a special flood hazard area. Okay. That would be the other zones.
And you talk about 26% chance of flooding. Is that for just anybody in a home?
That's if your home is located in a special flood hazard area, and that's government statistics.
Wow.
So isn't that amazing? Now, you brought up a statistic before that so many people that have flood claims are people living outside of this flood hazard area. So that's another thing that is random. We don't know. We just hear about it on the news every year. Somebody gets flooded. Oh my, what a terrible thing. But it does happen every year.
Well, Steve, how do I know if I need flood insurance?
Well, it's a good question. Most commonly, people are told they need flood insurance when they are buying their house and they are securing a mortgage. Mortgage companies have a database they use to plug your address in. If any part of your address is in a flood zone, you're going to hear about it and you're going to have to deal with flood insurance. There are situations where maybe you don't need to. Maybe your house is paid off. Maybe it was handed down in the family. And if it's still in a flood zone, probably by now you would know that. But one of the big things is you can get it, and when you get it with the mortgage company, it's effective the day of close.
Well, Steve, if a mortgage company makes you take it, is that expensive?
Yes, it can be. There's a lot of factors that work into it. There's lower elevations, there's above your base flood elevation, the zones that we talked about, the Zone A category, so it can be very expensive.
So if I live in town, is it more expensive, or if I live by a lake, is it more expensive?
Well, no, you can't generalize by that. It's all flood terminology that determines the price of that, okay. How much coverage you need.
So should I wait to get flood insurance?
Well, I think that's probably what people think they can do, is they can wait until maybe the waters are up quite a bit and then they purchase flood insurance, but it doesn't work that way because the flood insurance people are on you already. They know that people will wait till the last minute. So there is a 30-day wait before coverage begins on a voluntary purchase of flood insurance. Which means if we had the situation in Faribault a couple years back when the Straight River was rising and you decided to hurry up and buy flood insurance, it wouldn't have been effective at any rate. So these are a few little things to contemplate as time goes on. Anyone can purchase flood insurance. There's preferred policies, which means it's a set amount of coverage for a fairly low cost, so anyone can purchase those. And you don't have to be a homeowner. You can be a renter. You can cover your own personal effects.
Well, welcome back. Bart Jackson with American Family, and today we're at Ace Hardware here in Faribault, and we have Scott with us. And Scott's going to talk about sump pumps and how we can protect ourselves from those claims that could occur because we don't have the right maintenance done on our sump pumps. Well, Scott, why don't you kind of go over a little bit about sump pumps with us?
Absolutely. Folks, this may look like a 5-gallon bucket, but it's really your best friend with spring coming up. If you have a sump pump in your home, you want to fill this and pour it in your pit. You want to make sure your sump pump kicks on, and I would pour 2 of these in to make sure it cycles. And then I would unplug your sump pump, and when it goes off, if your pit fills back up, your check valve is no good anymore. This is what keeps your pump from running 24 hours a day. There's multiple kinds of sump pumps: pedestal, float switch, vertical float switch, but the bucket test works on them all. But if it's wet out, and I mean really wet, and you want to get that water away from your house, this is what you want to clamp on your pipe and run a extension way the heck away from your house so you're not pumping it twice. The other thing that you can do to make sure you've always got cohesive water damage protection is install a battery backup pump. And what that does is it's a second pump in your pit, 12 volt, hooked up to a battery, so when your regular pump fails, either from damage or lack of power, it kicks in and keeps you safe.
Well, Scott, you know, one of the biggest things that we see at American Family is some little things that happen, and just the situation of someone has something sitting around the sump pump pit and it falls in and it sits on that float. Well, that float won't come up anymore.
Absolutely.
And it's
all pits should be covered by code. All new pits come with a cover, but if yours doesn't, in an older home, plywood, or we can cut plexiglass covers for your sump pump, which will keep foreign objects out of the pit and to keep your pump from working.
That's all right.
well, thanks, Scott. Steve, is everything okay back there?
Had a little problem, but it's,
Yeah,
you know.
a little wet now. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Scott.
My pleasure, gentlemen.
Well, and remember, some of the most important things is we as homeowners, we don't want to have claims, and things that are so simple for us to prevent, like spending 5 minutes going and checking your sump pump pit by adding that water in there just to make sure it's going to run right. It's going to save you a lot of time, a lot of grief, and potentially a lot of money.
Speaking of grief, can you imagine coming home from a hard day at work to this much water in the basement? Bad.
This is very
Nobody
bad.
wants that.
Well, thank you again to Ace Hardware and Scott today for allowing us to be here. And thanks again for Steve for making a mess for him.
You're welcome.
This is Bart Jackson with American Family Insurance.
Steve Morgan with American Family.